didn't look that old.
No, we have my brother's oldest son married. His wife is one of 20. And the mother is the principal of the girls' high school in Svaz.
Oh, really?
I mean, she's been running a high school for the whole time. They have 20 kids.
That's crazy. No, because I've heard of like 13, 14, those are like big. It's just, numbers that are larger than that. I always wonder like how that even.
Well, I remember I've only been in their house twice. And the second time was Shabbos, so I didn't really look around. The first time was the l'chaim of our nephew and his wife to be. So I was like looking around the house, what does a house with 20 kids look like? So on the wall in the kitchen was everybody's name and what chores each kid has every day of the week. You can't do it any other way. I mean, the older kids are going to have to help. But,
it's crazy.
But I mean, you'll never have it that there's more than 12 in the house at a time.
Yes, it's
even
true.
That is
right. No, 100%.
So it's not.
Our 9th and 10th were twins. Yeah, which was pretty wild. But the older kids helped all the time. I mean, we have every picture we have of any of the older kids with the twins is 2 twins asleep in their arms and they're asleep in a chair. Every picture, because they would go. We had a rocking chair, and they'd put 1 twin in each arm, and we start rocking, and the twins would fall asleep, and then they'd fall asleep. And then, that's every picture. They have a picture of me having a drink. I have a cup with a straw on a shelf. I've got a twin in each hand, and I'm drinking out of the straw. So, it is what it is, Baruch Hashem. Some people think 2 is a lot. Some people think 5 is a lot. So, you have 10, you think, well, 20, how do you do 20? Okay, but you have 3, you go, how do you do 10? You just do it. I mean, you do it. It's you just do it. And as I was not there, but my wife tells me a story once. She was eating with her next door's neighbors, and we maybe had 4 or 5 at that point, and they had 3, 4, probably 3 or 4 at that point. And the kids were all the same age, so they're running around making a big balagan. And there was a chassan, Mordechai Rosner, a student of mine. So he was invited for the Shabbos lunch at our neighbors, and he was engaged at that point. He was a chassan. He got married in another month or 2. So he's sitting at the Shabbos table, and my wife said his face is getting whiter and whiter as he watches this balagan go on around him with these 9 kids running around making absolute havoc. And he's thinking, oh my. So my wife said, Mordechai, they come one at a time. Don't worry. You're not going to have.
They come 2 at a time.
Okay, maybe you'll get 2, but you're not going to have 9 at once, like all of a sudden. So he said, oh. Thank you. Slowly but surely you end up with an army, but at the beginning it doesn't start that way. Okay. I hope the people on YouTube enjoyed our little interlude here. You're supposed to start with a bang. Okay, we're starting right now. This is going to be the most amazing thing you have ever seen on YouTube in your life. Stay tuned. Do not turn away. Oh, okay, then we got that. We've got evidently like 2 or 3 seconds to grab them because the average attention span is a couple of seconds. And then they just press another one of those little boxes. Okay, so we saw what the Greeks want yesterday. Amazing idea, nice hey. Chochma shebabina, how we think, not what we know. What we know, you can know anything. The Greek, there's no problem. They're very smart. It's how we process information. If we process information like a Greek, so then they'll win. And what does that basically mean? That everything has to be understood within the bounds, and you could also say bonds of seichel, of intellect. Is that still us? Okay, not still us. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. No, it's fine. It's like sea breeze. Just imagine we're on the beach and the breeze is blowing. Okay, the palm trees are swaying, the waves are crashing on the beach, and we're learning chassidus, not paying any attention to any of that gashmis. V'hinei, b'chdei l'natzech b'milchama zu. So now the Rebbe talks about how to win. How do you beat the Greek? And we all have a Greek. We have a Greek inside our head, we have a Greek inside our heart. Right? How do we overcome that? How do we win that battle? Ein maspika ha'aveda shal pitam v'das. To beat the Greek, rational behavior will not do it. Right? That doesn't mean irrational behavior will. Super rational behavior will. Right? You can't, meaning debating the Greek, that doesn't mean you're not going to win the debate. Right? You can get on a stage and talk intellectually about ideas relative to other ideas. There's no question. Okay. And you can win. But no one really wins, right? When has anybody ever won a debate and the other side changed their mind and switched over to the Republican and the Democrat? They're having a debate, a presidential debate, and all of a sudden, I'll just to be an equal opportunity employer, I'll say, okay, so the Democrat wins the debate hands down. Let's say, can that happen? Sure, that's happened, right? Okay, wins it hands down, right? The Republican becomes a Democrat. What be told?
Didn't the Ramban have like a very famous debate?
Yes, no, 100%. You can. The Ramban was forced into a debate by the church, right? But yeah, so that's happened. But the idea of thinking that I'm going to, we'll see what the Rebbe says is the way to do it relative to ourselves, but also relative to other people, right? To bring another Yid closer to Yiddishkeit. You know someone, and you know there's a wonderful person, and they have a nefesh elokis. For whatever reason, they didn't have the advantages you have had, and they're not connected to Torah and mitzvahs. Okay, what's going to connect them to Torah and mitzvahs? Are you going to convince them intellectually that it's the right thing to do? There is that component, but that's not really what's happening. Right? What's going to happen if you're successful, generally, there are people who work that way, but very few. Right? What's probably going to happen is you're going to try to touch a deeper place in them that is very powerfully connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because when you're talking to them, you're not talking to because when you have a debate, what aspect of human intellect are you talking to? The seichel of the nefesh habahamis, the intellect of the nefesh habahamis, human intellect. Okay, but that person also has seichel of the nefesh elokis, and that person also has a soul. You're talking to their nefesh elokis. You're trying to arouse their nefesh elokis so that it will be successful in penetrating into their conscious reality. Now, sometimes a good idea will help do that. There's no question. But all sorts of other things are going to be just as important or more important. On college campuses, I don't know whether too many people remember the ideas they heard at the Shabbos table the first 10 times they went to Chabad house. What do they remember?
How they feel.
This is just nice. And it touched a place in them. Their non-Jewish friend thought it was nice also. They might have brought a non-Jewish friend who also thought, wow, that was really nice. But they're not affected the way the Jew is affected, because you just took the Jew to somewhere that is completely in line with who they really are. And that's going to make a very serious effect. That's going to have a very serious effect on them. It might be makif at first, right? It's going to be, not something that's going to penetrate into their conscious reality. You want to get into their conscious reality, but at first, what's going to affect them? Just the warmth of a Shabbos meal, a hug, what is probably the single most powerful thing? They see a Jewish family and they're just blown away. They say, wow, look what's going on here. Look at the way the parents and the children are relating to each other. And they're actually relating to each other. And the kids are having such a good time. And Shabbos is so amazing. And this kid got up, and what does every Chabad house do? And they're not doing it as a show. They're doing it because they're going to have to bring up their kids. But it's also good, that the 5-year-old gets up and says what he learned in Cheder and Chumash. And the kids on campus, it's quiet. They're all listening to this little cute 5-year-old standing on the chair explaining what he learned on the Parsha, right? That blows them away. The rabbi's going to say a Devar Torah. Okay, fine. That's nice. What are they going to remember about the Devar Torah more than anything else? He's going to tell a good story in the Devar Torah. Right? There's going to be a good story. Go, wow, that's a really interesting story, right? That's what I was going to talk about. We want to bring about changes in ourselves. Of course, intellect has part of it, because we're all intellectual beings. Whether we're intellectuals, that thing you call an intellectual. There are people who are and people who aren't. There are very, very smart people who know a lot of stuff, but they're not intellectuals. That isn't how they work. Right? And there are other people who might even know less stuff than that guy, but they're intellectuals. That's how they work. Okay, there are people like that, 100%. But that person also has a nefesh elokis, and he has emotions, and there's all sorts of other things going into who that person is, right? And you're trying to touch that place. So also in ourselves, we're trying to touch that place. Trying to touch it in another year. You're also touching birthright. Right? I heard an amazing statistic of birthright. Right? What's that statistic? This is 10 years ago I heard it, but it just says this is not happening if you bring a non-Jew on birthright, which happens, right? There's a lot of non-Jews who come on birthright. Right? 10 days in Eretz Yisrael. And this is not Mayanot birthright. This is birthright in general. Mayanot birthright does its best to inject something Jewish into the birthright trip, as opposed to it being an Israeli experience. They try to make it somewhat Jewish. Okay? And that means they might go to somewhere holy, as opposed to the holiest place will be Yitzhak Rabin's kever, right? Okay, or David Ben Gurion's house in the Negev, which sure might be an interesting place to go to, but I don't know whether there's a lot of kedusha there, right? So 10 days, not necessarily any focus whatsoever on Yiddishkeit. Travel around Eretz Yisrael in a bus with another 45 kids, stay in 3 or 4 star hotels, eat good food, have a good time, wonderful. Okay. The intermarriage rate of birthright graduates is 50% lower than kids who did not go on birthright.
Wow.
50%.
Wow.
That's the most successful educational program in the history of the Jewish people. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Now, you'll say, and it's right, well, the kid who goes on birthright is anyway somehow connected. Well, yes and no. Right? The kids who go on birthright, by definition, have never been on an organized trip to Israel before, because you're not allowed to go on birthright if you have been, right? So that means they're not the most tightly connected, right? I don't have a copy, but you know it all about that anyway, right? So that's a pretty amazing thing. What's touching them? Eretz Yisrael. How many good ideas are they hearing on that trip? Probably very few.
I've been on the secular birthright.
Right? Anything happen?
A lot of things happen, but good ideas, I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
But something about the connection of a Yid to Eretz Yisrael affects them. There's a connection of a Jew to Eretz Yisrael that's completely super rational, and that connects them.
100%.
One of the shluchim came here. I used to be the guy. Rabbi Levinger does it now. We haven't had a group in here for a while. I guess it's not birthright season. Now it should be. Anyway, whatever. So when Mayanot brings birthright trips, a lot of them come here to Mayanot for what's called a taste of Torah. Right? We used to do it a lot in the old days, and we stopped for a while because it was just too disruptive to the rest of the yeshiva, because in our old building we didn't have anywhere to put them, so we had to either shut down the zal or shut down the dining room. So that didn't really work so well at 9 o'clock in the morning. Right? So now there's room. Take them on the roof, let them freeze. So I used to be the one who would teach them. Rabbi Silver and I used to alternate teaching them. And of course, before you taught them, you talked to the shluchim or shaliach who brought them and said, okay, obviously I'm talking to the whole group, but there's probably 2 or 3 guys here that you think are more shaykh to go to yeshiva. I'll sort of focus a little bit on them. I'll look at them, ask them a question, do something, tell me who they are. All right, so he says, oh, there's one guy, he's on fire. I said, why, what happened? Well, we were in Sfas, and I took them to the Ariz mikveh. Now they don't do that in the regular birthright. And I took them to the Ariz mikveh. Now this was winter time, right? Took them to the Ariz mikveh. The Ariz mikveh in the winter is a spiritual experience. In the summer, it's the coldest water you'll ever go into. In the winter, it's just unbelievable.
It's an ice skating rink.
Oh, it's very special. It really is. Remember my brother the first time he went. This is 50 plus years ago. He was just a new Balchuva. He was in Sfas. He went to the mikveh, he put on his head. He went to Kogi. In those days, it was in a cave. Now there's hooks on the wall, and it was a cave. It was literally a cave. There were a couple of nails in the wall. The walls were wet from the water, and there was a floor and stone walls, cave walls. And that was it. And then you'd walk into the mikveh. So my brother's there, and he's like, whoa, this is really cold in here. And he's going to go in the water here, and it's freezing. Some Hasidic guy comes with his 10-year-old kid. Take off their clothes, jump in, jump out, get dressed very fast, this chassid, 45-year-old chassid, takes out a little flask of something. He's not sure what it was. Pours 2 little glasses. The 2 of them take a little l'chaim and off they go. He said, "Wow, this is it's like I just was transported back to Poland." So anyway, so they went to the Ari's mikveh, and he said this guy went in the mikveh and he like disappeared in there, and he started getting worried, like, why he's down there for so long? What happened? And Mamish started getting these, looking in, and he sees him, he's there, and he's moving, but like, is he alive? So finally he comes up, so he gets dressed, he says, what were you doing down there? So he said, "Rabbi, I didn't want to come up. I knew I had to because I would drown, but I didn't want to come up." He said, "Why? What was happening?" He said, "I felt like the whole of Eretz Yisrael was hugging me." He's underwater in Eretz Yisrael in the cave. Right? He said, "I felt the whole of Eretz Yisrael was hugging me." Now, this is a college kid from America. Right? That's what gets people to change. And that's what the Rebbe is going to explain to us. It's not, yes, there have to be, of course you have to learn intellectual ideas. And that's, Mayanot, that's what we do all day, right? But that's not ultimately what brings about real change in people. What brings about real change in people is a feeling of true connection to something. Where's the connection? The connection is the essence of your soul to the essence of God. And if you can touch that, then then it's forever. And that's exactly what the Mesiras Nefesh of the Chashmonim was all about, and that's what worked. So that's what the Rebbe is going to say. It can't be avodah al pitam vadas. End of the first line, page Chaf Aleph. Vafilu lo yaveda shelamayla mitam vadas. Even not the level of avodah that's beyond tam vadas, kshura, that is super rational, but hakshurim tam vadas. But still connected to tam vadas, meaning a level beyond intellect that intellect can understand is a reasonable level to touch, right? Okay, meaning we said earlier, there are things beyond intellect that intellect itself appreciates are reasonable, so to speak, right? Meaning your intellect can decide it's reasonable to do things that are beyond intellect. Okay. Now, are those things that you're doing beyond intellect? Yes. Can shatnez come to an intellectual understanding as to why? Can seichel come to an intellectual understanding as to why shatnez should be done? Well, yeah. Meaning it makes sense to do things that are beyond intellect because there's a state of reality beyond intellect, and that's what. In all fairness, here we are sitting and learning an intellectual work. I hate to use that word, but okay, it's ideas, and we're talking about levels beyond intellect, and the idea resonates in our head because it makes sense. Right? Are there things beyond intellect? Yeah. Is it reasonable to connect to those? Yeah. Is your connection to your parents intellectual? No. Does it resonate in your intellect? Yes. Right? But that might be a connection that's even further beyond intellect because it makes no sense whatsoever. Intellect can't understand why that connection exists because that connection exists 4 minutes after you meet the child. As my son once said, it's an amazing idea. I remember this was his 5th or 6th kid. It was not something that was new to him, right? He said, this is really an amazing, I think it was Shiro, this is not his 5th. He said, this having babies is just crazy. I said, why, what's up? He phoned us to tell us, So he said, well, when Shiro was born, he was 29, 30. Let's say 30. He was the father of now 5 children. He said, well, I don't understand. Shira is a few hours old, and I can't imagine life without her. I just lived 30 years without her. I don't have to imagine it. But there's no such thing as life without her. How does that work? That's what happens. Make any sense. That's not kshurim tam vadas. That's some completely transcendent level of connection. And it's that level of our connection to the Eibishter that we want to tap into. He's our tati. Okay, that's real. Doesn't make any sense. But there is a level of beyond tam vadas that's connected to tam vadas. And what's that? Havedish mitzad bechinas makif techaya. The level of avodah that comes from the makif, the transcendent, super rational state of your neshama, and what's that called? That's called chaya shebenefesh, which is, explain this in a minute, makif hakarev. the transcendent level, but the transcendent level that is close, meaning it's constantly being revealed in your conscious reality. It's a super conscious state, but it's being revealed in your conscious reality all the time. What's the obvious mushal for that? I'm not that you have to think it up. It's not that obvious, but once you hear it, it's very easily understood. Will is a makif. Will is not conscious you. It's subconscious or superconscious you. Okay, and that's why you don't have immediate control over it. You can't not want something. You cannot talk about it, you cannot think about it, you cannot do it, but you can't say to someone, don't want that. What do you mean, don't want that? I don't have control over that. Short term. Over time, I can come to a place where I don't want that. Right? The cigarette smoker cannot want a cigarette after a while, but that's going to take a while. Right? At first, what can he do? Don't smoke. Right? Best not to think about it, best not to talk about it, but certainly don't smoke them. Okay, so for 2 weeks he goes through physical withdrawal, and then after that it's a completely emotional connection, and it's going to take him probably 5 years to become someone who's really not a cigarette smoker, and there's a good chance he's not going to start again. Okay, after 1 year, don't believe it yet. Right? Meaning Baruch Hashem, he hasn't smoked for a year. 10 years later his lungs are pink. One of the first operations my wife was in as a student of medicine. So what do the students do in operations so they can be in the operation? Do you know? It's very interesting. I wouldn't have known this. Right? The students, you can't have a bunch of people standing around doing nothing, right? It's a small room and there's a lot going on. And but the students do a job that has to be done, but you don't need any expertise to do it.
Cleaning up blood.
It's pretty, no, the nurses do that. It's pretty gross, but after they cut the guy open, someone has to hold it open. So they put on these clamps, and the students sit there holding this person up, which is pretty gruesome, but you get to see what's going on inside. So my wife said she's standing by the table with these holding the guy open, so the surgeon can do what he has to do. So it was a heavy cigarette smoker. She said he looked like a furnace. He was all black and gooey inside. His lungs were all black and gooey. Ugh. I mean, you stick your face over an exhaust pipe of a car and breathe deeply 20 times a day. What are you going to look like? Right? Okay. So after 10 years, pink as a baby. Okay. But that takes time. So that's physical change. Superconscious, subconscious change, that's going to take a while. Okay, not stopping, you can do that cold turkey. You just decide today, that's it, no more cigarettes. Okay, can a person do that? Lots and lots, millions of people have done that. Incredibly hard, but kol hakavod to them. Amazing. That's conscious me, not smoking the cigarette. Subconscious me, not wanting the cigarette, I don't have control over that. So that's a makif. It's not conscious me, it's some other state. That being said, in terms of the neshama, it's a superconscious as opposed to subconscious. So that superconscious state is the place in your superconscious that is constantly revealing itself in your conscious reality. Because what are you constantly becoming aware of? What you want. You're constantly becoming aware of that. And then what do? Well, you decide whether or not you're going to think, speak, or do that thing or not. You make a decision, right? If it's a negative thought, if it's a negative desire, hopefully you go away. I'm not interested. If it's a positive desire, okay, hopefully you're going to act upon it, right? Fine. But it's a makif, but it's karev. It's close to conscious you. So there's that level of your soul, and that's called chaya shebenefesh. And then there's a higher level of your soul, which is the name of the essence of your soul, and that's yechida shebenefesh, the 5th level of soul. 5 levels of soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama. 3 levels of soul clothed in your body, responsible for conscious activity, action, emotions, speech, thought. Okay. That's in you, so to speak. That's conscious you. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, naran. You'll see often in Chassidus, nun, reish, nun, referring to those 3 levels of your neshama, which are clothed in your body and power you. And then there's the level of chaya shebenefesh. Chaya shebenefesh is a makif. Can mesiras nefesh come from chaya? Self-sacrifice? Absolutely. I want to stay connected to God more than I want to do whatever it is that's going on. Okay, fine, 100%. But there is, on that level of reality in Yechida Shebenefesh, there is a level of negative desire. There's a level of not Yechida, Chai. The level of Chai Shebenefesh, there is also a level of Chai Shebenefesh in the Nefesh Bahamis, the desires of the Nefesh Bahamis, the will of the Nefesh Bahamis. So in other words, this level of soul has an opponent, has opposition. Right? There is a level of soul that has no opposition. We've talked about this before. Rebbe talks about this all the time. Right? So even the level of chaya shebenefesh, meaning an incredibly powerful will, desire to connect and stay connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, even that won't necessarily overcome the Greek. Because there's going to be a contrary will, whatever it might be, to stay alive. That might be one of them. Mm-hmm. Third line, since they were able to defile all the shemen in the Eichel, and what have we learned? They were able to defile very, very lofty, holy states of reality. Hainu, Gama in Yonim, the Kedusha, even aspects of holiness, L'mayla mitam vadas, that are beyond intellect, Ella, but what are Kshurim mitam vadas. They were able to defile the highest levels of Kedusha that they could possibly defile. There is a level that they can't get to. And that's the level that has to be accessed in order to defeat them. And what's that? But Nitzochen and Milchama, how do you defeat the Greek? And this is what happened in the story, and that's why we celebrate the story. And it's very, very interesting. Someone told me something last night. Purim we celebrated right away. Hanukkah, was it say L'Shana Cheres? The next year they started celebrating Hanukkah. Why didn't we celebrate it right away? So he quoted Sikha the Rebbe. The Rebbe says something really quite fascinating, that Purim was Gashmias. So did we win the war in Gashmias? Yeah, we're alive. So that's obvious, right? You don't need to, time doesn't have to pass to see if that was real or not. You're alive. So eat and drink. The fact that you can eat and drink means you're alive. Okay, celebrate now. Hanukkah, what did we learn? That's all spiritual. How do you know whether the spiritual victory was real or just temporary?
Continues and it was real.
Wait a year, see what happens. Are they still connected to the Eibishter, or was it just like a high and now they're back to where they were? Because obviously things weren't great if the whole thing happened in the first place, right? These things don't happen when we're on top. These things happen to us when we're wavering in our connection to the Eibishter. And we rekindled that connection in an incredibly powerful way over Hanukkah. So was that something that just happened temporarily and everybody went back to business a couple of weeks later? Or was it something real? Well, we've all had moments of inspiration, right? How real is the inspiration? Well, inspiration is very, very nice, but if I don't invest the inspiration in a real change in my behavior, so then the inspiration was just a momentary thing. I felt warm and fuzzy for a while, and now I'm back to exactly where I was before, right? Which is why inspiration isn't really where it's at. That doesn't mean that inspiration isn't a nice thing. We're all happy to be inspired. But inspiration requires investment. I have to invest the inspiration in a change in my behavior. Then the inspiration's real. When did they see that this is real? When the Yidden, a year later after Hanukkah, were still powerfully connected to the Eibishter like they were at the time of the miracles themselves. Then they said, oh, it's okay, we can celebrate this. It's an amazing idea. Because in spirituality, it's going to take time. In Gashmias, am I alive? Yes, okay, let's eat and drink and be merry. That's Purim. Right away, they celebrate. And it says in the Megillah, right, they celebrate it right away. Mm-hmm. Not Hanukkah. It took a full year to know whether it was real. Because it's something l'mayla mitam vadas completely. And did that make a lasting impression or just a temporary inspiration? V'nitzachan ha'mechama, fourth line, hu al yedei ha'avodah d'mesiras nefesh dafka. Fifth line, beginning of the true victory in the war is the avodah of mesiras nefesh. Self-sacrifice. And what's the source of Mesiras Nefesh? Again, there's going to be different sources of Mesiras Nefesh. I can even decide that I'm going to give up my life for my country based on intellect. Right? I would imagine most Marines in the United States Marine Corps, they're willing to give up their life for the United States, and they've made an intellectual decision that that's a reasonable thing to do with my life. It's not coming from Yechidah Shebenefesh, right? But it can happen. That's real. Could come also from an incredibly powerful ratzon to give my life for my country, to serve my country, and I'm willing to give my life in that service. And then there's a level beyond that. That's called Yechidah Shebenefesh. That's the highest level of Mesiras Nefesh. And what's that? That's where the opposition disappears. Right? Meaning there is an opposition, but ultimately there's no opposition. There's no such... The reality of giving in to the opposition doesn't exist. It's not that I made the right decision. There's no decision to be made because there's only one way to go. Mm-hmm. The mashal that I heard once is, I'll let you stay alive if you let me cut off your head. No, that equation doesn't work. So for a yid, I'll let you stay alive if you're Mechal Shabbos is exactly the same. I'll let you stay alive if you let me cut off your head. Or I'll let you stay alive if you worship this idol, because that one's the simplest. No such thing. It doesn't exist. It's not a decision. It's just an existential state of no, I'm not separating from the Eibishter. I can't separate from the Eibishter. It's like I can't separate from my head. That's Mesiras Nefesh coming from what the place called the Yechidah Shebenefesh, the essence of the soul. The Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh, Hi Amida B'Teikef, is standing strongly, or maybe strong is the right way to say it, I'm not sure, Neged Kol Ameinim U'Ma'akvim, against all opposition. Monim U'Ma'akvim are things that delay or oppose. In this context, you'd say all opposition. Teikef Atzmi, an essential state of power. Shelamayla miyaseichel legam, that's completely beyond intellect. Doesn't make any sense. And as a matter of fact, there are even certain situations where the seichel of Torah would tell you that you're not obligated to do this. If the Chashmonaim had gone to ask a Rav, are we obligated to go fight them? The answer would have been no. Basically committing suicide. Not necessary. Right? If Pinchas had gone to ask a Shaila, Parshas Pinchas, right? There's a whole Parsha named after him because Pinchas taught us that there's a level of the connection of the Jew that transcends Torah. Because the Jew comes before Torah. That doesn't mean you and I can do anything against Torah down here. Right? But is there a level of you and I that is connected to the Eibishter that transcends the connection that the Torah allows us? Yes. That's why a Jew doesn't keep Torah and mitzvahs, is still essentially connected to the Eibishter. Is he revealing that in Eilam Hazeh? No, which is a big problem. It's an incredibly unhealthy situation to act in a way that's completely contrary to my essential being. It's like a dog that licks his paws and cleans himself all day. What are you doing? You're a dog. Go bark. No, he's sitting there, and he's unfriendly. He's unfriendly and makes in a litter. He makes and he covers it up in the litter. What are you doing? You're a dog. You're not a cat. Why are you acting like a cat? He's hung up, this dog. He's like a weird dog. Okay. So a Jew not keeping Torah mitzvahs is like a dog acting like a cat. It's not in line. He's not a cat. He's a dog, right? Is there anything wrong with a cat? No, cats are fine. Just for him, it's like a funny thing to be because that isn't what he is. Right? He's not acting in line with his spiritual DNA. It's just all off. So what about a person who touches that place? So then it's impossible not to act in accordance with your DNA. And that DNA exists even if the person is not necessarily keeping Torah and mitzvahs. That's who they are. That essential connection to the Eibishter is who they are. Now, what if a Jew comes to a point where they're faced with an option of to disconnect from God and stay alive, or remain connected to the Eibishter but have to give up their life? Jewish history is full of people who made the decision to give up their lives. Even people who weren't so frum in life were very frum in death. They gave up their lives. How frum were they before this challenge came? A regular, everyday guy living in some place in who knows where. Pick the place. Pick anywhere you want in Jewish history where the Goyim decided to start killing us. Well, it just happens once a century at least.
You don't have to look so far in history.
You do not have to look so far. No, you've got 2,000 years of Gullus. Pick your century and find your story. You'll just have to figure out where they are, where are the Jews living, what language are they speaking. Okay, say that, but it's the same story over and over again. Okay. And what is the story of those Jews? They were meis nefesh. They wouldn't give up their Yiddishkeit. Right? Were there some who did? Yeah, there were some who did. The majority didn't. I mean, that's Jewish history. It's quite astounding. Where does that come from? Yechidah shebenefesh. Right? Which is completely beyond Tam V'das, because you say, I don't understand. Why don't you just give up for a while and this will settle down and then you can get on with life? No, don't do it. So you'll be Machala one Shabbos and then you'll be able to keep the next 50, 500, 5,000. I don't know, 5,000, right? Whatever, however long you're going to live. You live another 60 years, the kid's 20 years old, he's got another, in those days, he's got another 55, 60 years to go, because we think they died young. They did die a lot younger than people do today, but in the mean, the life expectancy was about 55 years old, but that was skewered by the fact that so many people didn't make it to 20. If you made it to 20, you usually made it to 65, 70. Just making it to 20 was hard, because if you got half the diseases that children that we have get, they died, instead of just taking antibiotics and getting better in 7 days. So, how many families in the old days until 150 years ago didn't lose a child? Probably none. No such thing. Look in the history of RB. How many kids they had and how many kids passed away before they... It's just the way life was. I don't know how they dealt with it. It was the way life was. Yeah. So we should be very thankful that it's not that way now. Take of atzmi shalamayla miseichel legamri. Ukemoi, like what? 6th line. A mesiris nefesh al kiddush Hashem. Mesiris nefesh on that the person will give up their life. She'ena mitzad eza svara sichlis. It is not based on an intellectual decision, a logical conclusion. Ki'im, but rather what? And this is the statement that's quoted all the time in Chassidus. Right? Obviously, this is a translation into Lashon HaKodesh from the Yiddish. The Yiddish is azoy v'nit andrish. This is the way it is, and it's impossible any other way. It's impossible that it should be in any other way. I'll let you live if you let me cut off your head. No, there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. I'll let you live if you bow down to this idol. No, there's no such thing. It doesn't exist. On the level of Etzem and the Shama, that's impossible. I can't disconnect from myself. It's impossible. And the Eibishter is who we are. We're one with him on that level, on the level of Yechidah shebenefesh. On the level of intellect, I can imagine a situation where I'm not connected to the Eibishter, and I might come to the intellectual decision that it's worth to be disconnected for a little while in order to maintain the connection long term. It's a reasonable position to take. Right? I might want to stay alive more than I want to give up my life. It's a reasonable desire, right? On the level of Yechidah shebenefesh, those two equations, there's not even an equation. There is no option. That's the highest level of the Jew's connection to the Eibishter. Again, there's no option. I'll let you live if you cut off my head. That's not an option. What are you talking about? There's no such thing. Okay, that's Yechidah shebenefesh. That's the highest level of the soul. Its connection to the Eibishter. There is no such thing as being disconnected. Where's that revealed? The connection of the essence of the soul with the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'chinas Yechidah. The level of Yechidah. That's the name of the essence of the soul. The inyan is Kashus Atzmis. This aspect of his Kashus Atzmis, this essential connection. Who? What does it mean? She'i efshar klal liyos be'efen acher chas v'shalom. There is no alternative reality. There is no reality which can possibly exist that includes my being disconnected from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. There's no such thing. On that level, there really is no such thing. And if that level is accessed, so then down here in Eilam Hazah, the Jew will come to a point where there is no such thing as being disconnected from the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Alter Rebbe talks in Tanya, in the 25th chapter, about a Jew just thinking about that, and that will help them overcome all sorts of taivas that they might have in Eilam Hazah. Just thinking about Mesiras Nefesh. They don't have to actually exhibit it. They have to give up their life. But to think that they would give up their life for Yiddishkeit. Push came to shove. Would you give up your life for Yiddishkeit? Some Soviet heathen sticks a gun to your head and says, bow down to this idol. What are you going to do? It's absolutely clear at that moment what the issue is, and most Jews don't bow down. Okay. So if I won't bow down to that idol on pain of death, so I can't deal with this taiva that I have right now for something that's not exactly the reason I was sent to Elam Hazeh, and this taiva is bothering me, it's going to bother me for the next 5 minutes, I can't deal with it. I'd be willing to give up my life for the Eibush. I can't deal with the discomfort of not getting what I want for the next 5 minutes. Right? I can't. Giving up my life, it's like the story of someone who said, they asked him, how many cows would you give the king? 100. Would you give the king 50? 50. Give the king 50 cows. Would you give the king 25 cows? Of course I give the king 25 cows. Would you give the king 10 cows? Of course I give the king 10 cows. The king is the king. Would you give the king 1 cow? I have 1 cow. I'm not so sure I want to give the king my 1 cow. I'll give him 100. I don't have 100, so I can give him 100, no problem. But I give him the 1 I have. Ooh, that's a tough one, right? I knew a guy, I didn't hear him say this, a very close friend of mine heard him say this in a Farbrengen. I knew the guy very well, knew his son much better. Very, very big philanthropist who built everything Chabad in Cleveland, Ohio. And he told an amazing story. He used to sit in Farbrengen. He was the guy giving all the money, but he also used to come to the Farbrengen. He said that as he was making money, he was giving away a lot of tzedakah. Now this is 50 years ago. Right? He made his first $1 million. Now $1 million 50 years ago, in the way the economy worked then, you could retire and you would have enough money to live the rest of your life. Now, now it wouldn't be enough, but right? How much was a house 50 years ago? A beautiful house, $60,000. Okay. So $1 million would go a long way. Buy yourself 10 houses and live on the rent, right? I mean, no problem. And you could still be living on the rent from those 9 houses, right? You live in one, right? No problem. Okay. He made his first $1 million. He said something so interesting. He said all of a sudden I had a hard time giving tzedakah.
Wow.
It was really hard to give tzedakah. And I was trying to figure out, what's my problem? I have more money now than I ever had. And I always gave tzedakah. And now I'm having a really hard time giving tzedakah. And he's told this in Farbrengen. To the people whose tzedakah, these were the people benefiting from his tzedakah. They're sitting in a building that he built. It was his money. He said, then I realized I had hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was no problem giving away dollars. Now I only have 1 million. Oh, I don't want to lose my $1 million. He said, then I realized, well, I'm cracked. So I started giving. I said, I read that, but he said that got in my head. I only have 1. I don't want to give away my 1. We can see that happening, right? Wait, if I give away $100,000, I won't have $1 million anymore. Oh, I have nothing. No, you have 900,000 again. No, but I had 1 million. There's a lot more than 1 now, so it's okay. He's fine, right? His company went public on the Wall Street, on the Dow Jones. That was before NASDAQ. He's okay. You don't have to send him challahs for Shabbos. But it's so interesting that he also hopped it, right? He said, wait a minute, why am I finding it so hard to write a check? Never found this hard before, because I only have 1. Because to give up the 1 you have, that's hard. So to give up the taiva I have right now, it's very nice to think conceptually I give up my life for the Eibishter. And no one's asking you to give up your life. They're just asking you to not give in to this taiva right now. Oh, but I'm here. That's my 1 taiva. Now, still have to give it away. But that's hard. What helps me? Remembering Mesiras Nefesh, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in the 25th chapter. But where does the real Mesiras Nefesh come from? Etzem HaNeshama. The ability of the Jew to realize that to be separated from the Eibishter doesn't exist. There's no such thing. It can't be. And since from that level of Yechida, next to footnote 50, Ein Shayach Shum Pagam, it's not Shayach, any blemish in the connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Batuma or defilement, Chas v'Shalom. And what's that similar to in the story of Hanukkah? 1 little place that was beyond the tomb of the Greeks. And what's that? Bedugmas apach echad shel shemen. Like that 1 flask of oil, that one barrel of oil, shayachosim b'chaisma shel kohen gadol, that was sealed with the seal of the kohen gadol. And what does that represent? A place in holiness that the Greek can't defile. And what's that in you and I? Etzem and Neshama. That place that can't be defiled by all of the darkness of Eilam Hazeh. That place that is essentially connected to the Eibishter. The Jew sitting in who knows what the Jew is sitting chas v'shalom doing the worst of aveiros possible. That level of the neshama is still connected to the Eibishter. All the other levels are just completely messed up. That level is there, right? A person can dye their hair blonde for 60 years. Their DNA is still black hair. Their revealed reality can be blonde. Even her husband doesn't know. Right? Only your hairdresser will know for sure. That was a line from a famous company that was trying to entice women to dye their hair. I don't know, one of these companies, Breck or something, I don't know. Only your hairdresser will know for sure. I mean, your husband won't know. Mm-hmm. I had a student who, blonde woman from Brazil, who I taught personally. She was sent by the shaliach to go through shiur, and it was the summer, and I had time. In those days, Mayanot was off in the summer, which was wild. So the first few years of Mayanot. So I taught this woman, 29-year-old Brazilian woman, enchanting young lady, right? Wonderful, wonderful person, very interested in learning. And I said, well, let's sit with her for a couple hours a day. She was in a school, in a women's school that I was teaching in. So I would sit with her for a couple hours a day and teach her things that she had to know. So then she got married, and that's why it was happening. She got married to an extremely wealthy fellow. And they used to bring me to Brazil to teach her in their house for a week every now and then.
Wow.
So I go to Brazil. It was a lot of fun. I'd stay in their house and, to hang out in the Chabad house, which was he gave me a car to drive. The only thing I knew how to do was go from their house to the Chabad house and back. And driving in Sao Paulo was beyond me, but I knew how to do that. Once I took the wrong car, and that was the last time I was allowed to take a car. I took Leo's new Mercedes. I thought I was taking the old one. What do I know? There were like 5 black Mercedes in the parking lot. There's 2 people who drive in the family. There's 5 cars there. So I had my own Mercedes, like that was evidently 2 or 3 years old. It was the old one, but I took the wrong one. Ooh, he started giving me the Fiat after that. After that, I got this old Fiat. That's what I was allowed to take. So I taught this woman for years. All of a sudden, she's wearing a black shaitel. I said, Esther, why are you wearing a black shaitel? So she laughed. She said, my hair's black. I'm not blonde. Right? Her first shaitlach were also blonde. She said, my hair's black. I didn't know her hair was black. She looked like a blonde. She looked like she had blonde hair. Right? Okay. She didn't have blonde hair. She dyed her hair blonde. Okay, would anybody know? No, if you have enough money, no one will know, right? They'll do it right, and you'll always get it before the roots that are black start showing up. You'll dye it again, right? You have to keep doing it. Okay, no, how would anybody know that she doesn't have that her DNA isn't black hair? Her DNA is black hair. Did the DNA change? No. Her revealed reality was whatever it was for however long she dyed her hair blonde. I have no idea how long. Right? Okay. But her DNA changed? So a Jew can dye their hair non-Jewish. Everything they do is not Jewish, right? Almost. They eat food that's not Jewish food. They do things on Saturdays that aren't Jewish things to do on Saturdays. They eat food on Yom Kippur. Who knows what they do, God forbid, right? What's their DNA? They're Yid. Their DNA is absolutely, completely, and totally connected to the Eibishter. Their spiritual DNA, Etzem and Neshama. And interesting enough, even that Jew, it's sometimes, not all the time, sometimes even that Jew, it's so covered up. Even that Jew, sometimes a certain event will arouse in them a very, very powerful connection to their Jewish reality, and they'll change. That's hard because it's so covered up. In the early days, sorry for bringing so much, but in the early days of Lubavitch in America, so the Frierdiker Rebbe sent some people out on shlichus to go and find Jews, talk to them about Yiddishkeit. One of those Jews was someone named Rav Yosel Weinberg. He's the father of the Shaliach in my hometown, father of Levi Weinberg in Johannesburg. So, and Yosel Weinberg always told the story that they were traveling around, and they somehow Phoenix sticks in my head. I don't know why Phoenix. I don't know whether they got as far as Phoenix, but whatever. They were somewhere Jewish, and they wrote a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe describing how amazing it was, how the Jews they ran into didn't seem to have any connection to Yiddishkeit whatsoever. Were a little bit of Torah, a little bit of Farbrengen, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they're immediately connected again. And the mashal they wrote is like a letter in the Sefer Torah that has a small crack. You put in a little bit of ink, and it's a whole letter again. So that sounds like a nice mashal. Right? So they wrote that letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote them back and said that's a terrible mashal. That mashal is not that parable is not in any way, shape, or form applicable to what you're talking about, because a letter that's cracked is a puzzle letter, and not only is the letter puzzle, but the whole Sefer Torah is puzzle. The whole Sefer Torah is disqualified. So what you're saying is this Jew is disqualified, and you're disqualifying the whole Jewish people. There's no such thing as a Jew that's disqualified. Every single Jew is connected to the Eibishter. You say, what's the proper mashal? Like a letter carved in stone. What might happen? It might get full of sand and dirt, and you don't see the letter. It's covered up. But when you move away all this schmutz that's covering up the letter, what's there? A perfect letter's there. It's always been there. There's always been a perfect letter there. It's just covered up with all sorts of stuff. That's why he's the Rebbe and they're the Hasidim. But their mashal sounds like a good mashal to us, right? No, Rebbe completely negates the mashal, because then you're saying a Yid is puzzle. No such thing. There's no such thing as a Yid that isn't essentially connected to the Eibishter. That's the nature of a Jew. What if I touch that place? Then there's no Greek. The Greek has no power over me. He has all the weapons and he has everything. Everything's on his side. Nothing will move that Jew away from the Eibishter. Right? Because on that level of our connection to the Eibishter, none of those things exist. They're not there. There is no negative reality. There is no negative rutzain on that level. Negative will. There's no negative intellect. No negative emotions. On the level of emotions, there's emotions of the Nefesh Elokis, there's emotions of the Nefesh Bahamis. On the level of intellect, there's an intellect of the Nefesh Elokis, and there's intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis. On the level of Ratzon, there's Ratzon of the Nefesh Elokis, the will of the Nefesh Elokis, and there's the will of the Nefesh Bahamis. The level of Etzem, it's only Nefesh Elokis, there's nothing else. It's only the Eibishter. And on that level, there's Oivin Itandrish. This is the way it is, and there isn't any other way. There's no alternative. There's no choice. It just is what it is. That's the level that the Greek can't defeat. And what's that similar to? Like the Rebbe says, the flask of shemen, 5 lines up from the top, in the end of the parenthesis. External reality can't touch that place. Let's just try to finish the paragraph very quickly in 2 minutes. Based on the Mesiras Nefesh, the self-sacrifice that comes from this place, which is impossible to defeat, by virtue of this specifically, that's how you win the war against the Greek. As was in the Milchama with the Greeks in simple pshat, in Gashmias. What brought about the victory of the war? By virtue of the incredible self-sacrifice of Matisyahu Bonav. They came to a point where they said, we're 12 guys. We're going to go take on the strongest army in the world. There's not a very good chance we're going to win. It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as allowing them to have control over us. It doesn't exist. What they're asking us to do, it can't be. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And away they went. And they won. Right? Miraculously. Definitely miraculously. Even though they were weak and few, they stood b'Mesiras Nefesh in a ridiculous, absolutely absurd way, completely irrational. To fight strong and many. By virtue of this, they aroused and affected Gamba Anshe Derem, also in the people of their generation. The people of their generation saw their Mesiras Nefesh and were aroused and inspired to act in kind. And they also limser nafshem al kiddush Hashem shalei lavar al das b'shum ofer, not to transgress the religion in any way, shape, or form. Yedeza nitzchos milchama, because of this they taka won. The Abishah looked down and said, "Okay, you're going to win because you've just accessed a point that can't lose." So the same guy who told me the thing I told you before also told me something else. We happened to be davening Marv next to each other in a shul, and he's an old friend, and he said, "Oh, I learned 2 really beautiful ideas from the Rebbe today. You want to hear them?" He says, "Yeah, sure." He's a butcher, so he does for a living, but he likes to learn Torah. So the Rebbe said, "What's the Indian Mahadran min Mahadran in Hanukkah? How can it be Mahadran min Mahadran? Why is everything Mahadran min Mahadran? It's the only halacha in Shulchan Aruch that the basic halacha is Mahadran min Mahadran. Like no one lights one candle. You can be Mekam the mitzvah lighting one candle every night. No one does that. No one even knows you can do that. Even people who are lighting a Hanukkah lich, like we talked about so many times on the kitchen table with non-kosher food, they're lighting Mahadran min Mahadran. What's this all about? Mahadran min Mahadran of Hanukkah. So there's many, many different answers the Rebbe gives in this particular sikha that he was quoting. I think it was Beis Tevis, Tavshin Tezvav, I think that's what he said. That the Rebbe says that the Yidden expressed this tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And the Eibishter showed his incredible love for the Yidden by virtue of allowing us to win the war and also find the Shemen and light the Shemen. And the Eibishter loves us so much, he wanted us to do the mitzvah in the best way possible and not use Shemen Tomei. And we could use Shemen Torah. And so they made the Shemen Torah, the pure oil, last for 8 days. So the Yidden said, the Eibishter is showing his love for us, Mahadran, how dear we are to him. So we'll do the mitzvah Mahadran min Mahadran. We'll show him that we love him even more than he loves us. That's why we all do it. That's one of the answers the Rebbe gives. The incredible love the Eibishter showed us by doing all those miracles, so we show back but double. Okay. That's Hanukkah. Hanukkah is Mahadran min Mahadran. And the Rebbe also talks about the fact that Hanukkah is Lashon Chinuch. Chinuch has to be Mahadran min Mahadran. Education. Can't cut corners in education. Children's education has to be Taras HaKodesh. They have to be taught the way a neshama should be taught. Right? Are there other things they might have to learn at some point in their life? But say they'll figure it out. Right? They'll learn it if they have to. If they don't have to, they won't. Say that. There is an old story. It's an old Israeli story. Right? In terms of winning the war against all odds. So after I think it was actually 48. So the declaration of the state, and of course what that produced was the war. The war is not over. It's not like we won the war, but we didn't lose the war, because if we lose the war, we're not here anymore. So we didn't lose the war, and they came to some sort of armistice or whatever, and the country was unbelievably poor. I mean, really poor. You know that malt beer that you can find in this country that you really can't find anywhere else? You ever see malt beer? But it's all over this country, much less than it used to be. It used to be, there was 2 things on the shelves if you wanted a soft drink. There was malt beer and Coca-Cola. Those were the 2 things. And why was there so much malt beer in this country? It has a lot of protein. Pregnant women, there's no milk. There's no milk in the country. Why was there no milk? No cows. Right? There weren't enough cows to produce enough milk. Now there's a lot of milk. You ever notice there's a lot of milk in this country, right? You ever open up the fridge in the yeshiva and see just trays and trays and trays of milchiks, like beyond anything you could imagine? Okay. Now there's lots of milk. In those days there was no milk. Right? So pregnant women needed a certain protein, and they could get the same protein they get in milk from this Nesher malt beer. So they would drink malt beer. That's what people would drink. And it just sort of stuck around as a drink in the country. It's still out there. You never see anybody buy it, but it's on the shelves. I think it's probably the same bottles from 1956. They're just still on the shelves. But so it was a poor country. So in those days, what was going on? America was rebuilding Germany. Right? Marshall Plan. Let's rebuild Germany. Okay, so someone said, this is a joke, obviously. Someone said to Ben Gurion, look, why don't you declare war in the United States? And after you lose, they'll rebuild you and you'll be in much better shape than you were before. He said, it's a great idea, but what if we win? Then we're really in trouble. So whether that's a true story or not, I don't know. But it's a true story in terms of what was going on in those days. Right?
What's your name? Snake in German.